Hello and welcome. I am Raghav and today we are going to learn step by step from scratch how to do API testing with Playwright. This is going to be very easy and very interesting. We will start with the project setup. How do we set up the API testing project? We will learn how to create a API test step by step. We will create a get API request, a post API request, put and delete API request, and then we will see how do we validate the API response, how do we add the assertions, and then we will see how we can use the Playwright UI mode and we can check our responses, logs, error, console output and everything, and then we will see how do we see the HTML report for our tests. This is going to be very easy and very interesting. So let's get started, and you will also find all the notes, all the links in the description of this video. So first let us start with project setup. Now if you are already working with a Playwright project, you can use the existing project, or if you want to do a new project setup, you can follow me. So in case you want to continue with your existing project, you can skip the project setup and continue from the next slide. However, I will show you all the steps from scratch. So step number 1 is we will create a new folder for our API testing project. So I will go here. You can keep the folder at any location on your system. I keep all my project folder under this projects folder and then Playwright. So here I will create a new folder and I will call this as Playwright API testing. Okay, so I have created this folder Playwright API testing, and now next step is you have to open this folder in your IDE. So you can use any IDE that you are using, or you can use VS Code that I am going to use. So I will first open my VS Code, and here I'm going to open the folder. So you can open it from here. We have open folder. You can also go to file and we have options for open folder here, or you can just drag and drop the folder onto VS Code. So I'm going to drag and drop this folder here, and here I will say yes, trust the authors, and you can see we have got our Playwright API testing folder added on VS Code. Okay, next step is we will open the terminal or the command line on the folder location, and then we will run the command npm init playwright @latest. So this will set up a node project and will also add Playwright in the project and will do all the project setup. So here you can open a command line and then first go to the location of the folder, that is Playwright API test or whatever folder you have created, or you can use the integrated terminal in VS Code. So here if you see, if you go to the top, we have this terminal here, and we can open a new terminal, or you can press the Control Shift and backtick key. Backtick key is the top left key on your keyboard just below the escape key, or you can also press Control plus backtick key and this will open the terminal. You can see it has opened the terminal, and it has opened the terminal at the same project folder location. So this is the advantage of using IDEs like VS Code. We can use the integrated terminal and it opens on the same project folder. We can directly start typing our commands here. So I will say npm init playwright @latest, npm init Playwright, and if you want to use a specific version you can give the version number, or if you want to use the latest, I will just say latest. So this is the command I have written here, and I will hit enter. So this will do the setup. So here it is asking, do you want to use TypeScript or JavaScript? You can use the up or down arrows on your keyboard and select. I am selecting JavaScript and hit enter. Where do you want to put your end-to-end tests? It is giving the default folder tests, I will use the default. I'll just press enter here. Then add a GitHub action workflow. I will go by the default false and press enter. Install Playwright browser. I will go with the default true and press enter. And this will now initialize the node project. So you can see package.json file is created, package log.json file is created in a node project. This is a very important file. So here it has all the information about the project. It also has all the dependencies that we have used in the project. So you can see we have got Playwright test. I had created a video earlier on what is package.json, package log.json. If you want, you can check that. So if you just search for what is package.json by my name, you should get that video. Oh yes, this is the one. You can check this video. And we have got our project setup. You can see we have got our tests folder here. It has some example tests already created. We can just run these tests and check. If you want to increase the font, you can go to the settings. So here is the settings icon. Go to settings and go to text editor and font, and here you can increase the font. So you can see it has increased the font size. Also, if you want, you can increase the font size of the terminal text. So for that you have to open the command palette. You can go to view and we have command palette here. You can also use the keyboard shortcut Control Shift P, and if you say open user settings JSON, or first you can just go to open default settings JSON. This will open the JSON file, and here you can check what is the terminal font size. So there is a terminal font size setting. Let me check what it is. Okay, it is terminal dot integrated dot font. Yes, this is the setting. However, in this particular file it may not be editable. So if I try to edit, you can see it says cannot edit in read only editor. So you can just copy this setting and then go to command palette. I am pressing Control Shift P and then say open settings, and you will see this open user settings JSON. Open this file, and here you can give a comma at the end and add this setting. Let's say I want to make it 20 and say save it. You can see the font size increases for the terminal as well. Okay. Okay, so now we have, I think you can see it properly. So we have done this step and we have got our package.json and the test folder. The project setup is done. Now if you want to run and check the existing test, you can say npx playwright test. This will be good to check if everything is working fine. I will clear the terminal. You can also hit this up arrow to maximize the terminal window, and here if I say npx playwright test, it will run the existing tests and we can check if our project setup is done correctly. So it is running 6 tests using one worker. So it is running on Chrome, Firefox, WebKit. And yes, everything is working fine. You can also run this command npx playwright show report to check the HTML report. So it opens the browser and you can see all the details about your tests, and we have the filters as well here. Alright, so this is all working fine. I can press Ctrl C on the terminal to stop the report, and I will say clear. Okay, so we can also then see our tests and see the UI mode of Playwright. So if you say npx playwright test, I am pressing the top arrow, up arrow on my keyboard to go to the last command. So npx playwright test -- UI and hit enter. So this will open the Playwright UI, and here we have a light mode, and you can change the mode from here, dark mode, and you can see all our tests come here. We can run from here. We can see all the details. For example, if I want to run this particular test, I can say run. I will get all the details here. I can see each and every step, the screenshot, and I can also see the output from this button, toggle output, and then I can see my tests. I can go to the source and I can see the test code, source code. We have logs, network, attachments, everything is here. Alright, you can also watch it and also open it in VS Code. So if I say open in VS Code, you can see it goes to VS Code and it is asking for permission. I will say yes, and it opens that particular test here. Alright, so this is very handy, very intuitive. You can see all the screenshots, before, after, action. You can see this, before was this, after was this, for this page.goto, this was the action. Everything is here, right? This is very intuitive, and in a moment we will see how we can use it for API testing as well. Okay, and we have already seen the report. Now we are going to create a new file for our API tests. So I will go to the folder, test folder. You can do a right click and say new file, or you can click on this button that says new file here, and I will say API underscore tests.spec.js. You can give it any name, but it should follow the convention set in the playwright config.js file. So if you open this file, playwright config.js, if you see any particular naming convention to be followed, you can use according to that. As of now, I don't see any naming convention is here. It just says that this particular folder, that is tests, which is just under the main project folder, will be considered for all the tests. Alright, so let me open back my file. I have created this file API underscore tests.spec.js, and as of now it is empty. So we are done with the project setup here. If you want, you can take a screenshot of this screen and keep it handy with you. Now we will continue with the steps to create a API request and validate the response, run it, validate the response, and see the results. So here the first step is we will import the test and expect packages from the Playwright library. Okay, so I will say here import test and expect from, I am getting this auto suggestion. If you don't get the auto suggestion box, you can try pressing Ctrl and spacebar on your keyboard. So this is what I have added. I can save using Ctrl S on my keyboard. Step number 2 is, now we will create a test. So let me first just create a simple test. I will say test, and I will give the title, or I'll just say API get request, and I will say async, and here I will use the API request context. So I will say request, and use this arrow symbol and a curly bracket start and stop. So I have created this test. You can see this is the body of our test, and this is the API request context, and this is what we will use to run our APIs, get the response and do all the validation. So this is very important, and you can see it is coming from this API request context. Okay, so here this is what, if you want you can read more about this API request context on the official documentation. So this is what we use for our API testing. Okay, now next step is we will use a API URL and use the get method to run the API, and then we will also store the response in a variable. So for that we need some demo APIs. So here I am going to this website reqres.in. It has some demo APIs, reqres.in. This is the website, and here if you scroll down you can see some dummy APIs that we can use for testing. So we have get requests, post, put, patch, delete, etc. So here I will say this is what we use: await request.get and the URL or the endpoint, and whatever will be the output, that is the response, we are storing in a variable called response. So I am saying here const response. You can use any variable name is equals to await request dot, and you can see all the methods are here: delete, fetch, get, patch, post, put. I will say get, and within the brackets, within quotes, I will give the URL or the endpoint of the API. So here let us see, this is a list users get request, this is get a single user. Let us use this one, and this is the URL. You can click here, open in a new tab, and you will get the complete URL that you can copy and add it here. Okay, so this is now our, this will run our API request and store the response in a variable called response. Okay, at this moment if you want you can save. I am pressing Ctrl S, and you can go to the UI. If you have closed the UI you can open it again, and even if it is running, it will take the live changes. So you can see it has taken this changes, it has got our API get request, the file and the test here. I can run from here and check if everything is fine until now, and yes, looks like everything is fine. I am getting this. If I go to the network I can see this, I'm getting all the details here: response, request, response, body, everything is coming here. So that means everything is working fine until now. Okay, so now next step will be I will check the status code. So here I can use the expect assertion and say response.status to be 200. So I will say here expect, and I will say response dot status dot to be, and I will give the status code 200. Okay, so I'm anyways going to keep all the notes in the description. If you want you can refer from there as well. Let me just go back. I will save this and go back to the UI and run it again just to check if it is able to run this assertion. And yes, looks like it is able to. If I see this, this is passed now, so this is running fine. Then I can also check if the response contains some particular text. For that I have to extract the text from the response and store it in a variable. So I am saying I will use this variable text. You can use any variable name, and here I will say await, and I will say response dot text. and then I can check if text contains some particular value. I will say expect text dot to contain, and here if you see this particular API request, it gives us the details of a particular user. First name is Janet, last name is Weaver, and we have got some other details. I'm just going to check that in the response we get the value Janet. I will save this and run again and check if everything is working fine, and you can see this all is working fine. Okay, I can also check in case of Janet. If I say John, this should fail. I will save and now run again, and let us see what happens now. So you can see it fails, expect to contain, and here it says this particular thing has failed. If I check the source, I will also get the source here. I can see the errors here, and this is the particular line which has failed. So you can see this is so easy to find the errors, the code which has thrown the error, and what's the actual issue, and the details here. Okay, and now if you want, you can also write the response on console. For that you can say console.log and await response.json. So if I say here console.log await response.json, so this will now also write the response on the console. So save and I will run it again. Let me change this back to Janet so it will not fail. I will save and run again, and this time it has passed. You can see everything is working fine. And now if I go to the console, you can see we also get the response written on the console. If I check the network, I can see the request, response, body, everything is coming fine here. Alright, and we have already ran and checked the results. So this is how, these are the steps to create a very simple get API request with Playwright. If you want, you can take a screenshot of the screen and keep it handy with you. Now let us go to a post API request. Now get request was very simple. We just have to give the URL or the endpoint, and then we do all these assertions. However, in a post request we have the request body or the payload as well. So if I check this particular example, you can see along with the URL we also have to pass the request body or payload. So let us take this example, and the first steps are the same. We will add the imports and we will create the test. Now because we are going to continue in the same file, I am not going to add the imports again. I will just say I'll create a test. I will say test and give the title API post request. I'll say async, give the request context, and I will create the test. Now if you add this dot only here, if you run this entire file, it will only run this particular test. However, as we are using the UI, we are running from the UI, we don't need this. We can just keep it as it is. Okay, now this remains same. I will use request dot post. So I'm just copying it from here. The method will change. Instead of get, I will say dot post. Alright, and I am storing it in a variable response. However, after giving this URL, so let me also check the URL that we have to give. So this is the URL. So I'll change the URL here. So after the URL we have to give the request body. So here you can see step number 3 is send a post request along with request body and store the response in a variable, and this is how we give it. So here after the URL I will give a comma, and then I'll start a curly bracket, start and stop, and then here I will say data colon and give the request body. So I will say data colon, and here I am just going to copy this request body and paste it here. You can also correct the formatting by doing a right click and say format document and save it. Okay, so this is how we give the request body in a post request. Then the rest of the things will remain as it is. We can add the assertions here, we can check the response code, we can check some particular value in the response. So let's say I will just copy this assertions, all these assertions, checking the status code, checking a value in the response, and also writing the response on the console. I'm copying this from the last test and pasting it here. Okay, the status code for a successful post request is 201, so I'm adding 201 here, and then in the response whatever name and job we give, we get back the same values here. So let me check. I'm going to give my name here, Raghav, and I will say job is teacher, and in the response I'm going to check if I get back the name here, and that's it. So this is our test for a post request. Save this and I will run and check. It has come here, API post request. I will run this and you can see everything is fine. I also get the console output. I see the network, I see the request, response, body, everything is fine here. Here also all the assertions are working fine. Okay, so we are able to run our post request as well, and we have already ran and checked the results. So if you want, you can take a screenshot of this screen as well and keep it handy with you. Next we will see a put request. Now put is very much similar to a post request because it also has a payload or a request body. So for a put request, let us see some example. We have this put. Put is used for update, and it is used to replace the entire resource on the server, and patch is also for update, but it is for a partial update. It does not replaces the entire resource, it changes something, but put is for a complete replacement of the resource. So let us take this example. I will go to my VS Code and I'm just going to copy this entire post API request and I will copy and paste it again, and I will call it API put request, and here instead of post method I will use a put method, request dot put. We will have to change the URL, so let me just copy the URL. So you can see this is going to update a particular user with ID 2 here, right? And here the body looks same, we have name and job, so this is fine. The status code we should check is 200. A successful post, a successful update or a put request sends the status code 200, and then we are checking the values in the response and writing the response, this is all fine. So I will save this and check on the Playwright UI. It has come here. Let us run this and check. And yes, looks like everything is working fine. We are able to run this. If I check the console, we are getting this output here. If I check the network, everything is fine. We get status 200, method put, this was a request, content type, duration, size. I can check the request here. This was a request that went to the server. This is the response from the server, and this is the response body. Okay, so this is all working fine. Now we have got the delete API request. Here we just give the URL and we can check the status code 204. So if I check a delete request here, this one is for delete. So I'll take this URL. Let me first just copy the get API request test and I will paste it here. I will say this is API delete request, and here I will say request dot delete, and this is a particular user, so this is the URL. I think it should be the same. Yes, it is the same. It is deleting the user with ID 2 here, and here I'll just check the status code should be 204. I don't need all these here. So this is my delete request. I will save and go to the Playwright UI. We have got the request here. Let us run and check. So everything is working fine. You can see if I check the network, this is delete 204 and request. In the response we get this response headers, and here body will be empty because the resource is now deleted. Alright, so this is how we use a delete API request. This is how we run a API request on Playwright. Now here are some references. If you go to the official documentation, if you search for Playwright API testing, you will see the official documentation, and this will be very useful and very handy. You can see the latest changes here. So here you can see all the latest changes. Then if you check the API request context, so this is the context we have been using, the request context, which is actually the API request context. You can read more about it. You can see all the methods. Delete is here, dispose, fetch, all these methods you can check. And then you can also see the response methods or API response assertions. So if you search for API response, you can see the API response here. Then API response assertions are here. You can see methods. So here you can see if I say await expect response dot to be okay, that means it will check the response is in range 200 to 299. That means all the positive response status codes. Similarly, if I say not to be okay, it will check it is not in that range. So you can check all these API response assertions as well. Alright, and this is the demo APIs that we have used. And please do some hands-on. If you have any issues, if you face any problems, let me know, and I will see you soon. I hope this was very useful. Thank you for watching, and never stop learning.